The communication hub on Station Alpha buzzed with activity as another urgent message arrived. Commander Blake watched the holographic display flicker to life, showing the pale blue face of Ambassador Vale from the Galactic Coalition. The alien's usually calm expression was replaced with something Blake had never seen before: pure desperation. "Commander Blake, we need to speak immediately," Vale said, his voice carrying across the vast distance between stars. "The situation has become critical." Blake straightened in his chair. In the 3 years since Earth joined the Coalition, they had received many requests for aid, but nothing in Vale's tone suggested this was routine. "Go ahead, Ambassador. What's the emergency?" The hologram shifted, showing a star map with several systems highlighted in red. "The Villani system is under attack. The Krex Empire has launched a full invasion. We estimate the Villani have less than 2 weeks before complete defeat." Blake studied the tactical display. The Villani were one of the Coalition's peaceful member species, known throughout the galaxy for their advanced farming techniques and beautiful art. They had no military, no weapons, no way to defend themselves against an aggressive enemy. "What about Coalition forces?" Blake asked. "Surely the fleet can respond." Vale's expression darkened further. "Our main battle groups are engaged on 4 different fronts. The Krex timed this perfectly. They know we cannot spare ships or troops." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "That is why we are contacting Earth." Blake felt a mix of surprise and suspicion. The Coalition had always treated humans as the newest, least experienced members. Most alien species viewed Earth's military as primitive, suitable only for minor patrol duties. Now they were asking for help with a major crisis. "Tell me about the Krex," Blake said. The display changed, showing images of tall, heavily armored creatures with sharp claws and predator eyes. "The Krex Empire has conquered 17 systems in the past 50 years. They are excellent warriors, brutal in their methods. They take prisoners only to use as slaves. Their technology is advanced, their ships are powerful, and their tactics are proven effective." Blake watched footage of Krex warships attacking defenseless colonies. The aliens showed no mercy, destroying everything that resisted and capturing everything useful. It was systematic, efficient, and completely ruthless. "How many ships do they have in Villani space?" Blake asked. "Current intelligence suggests 50 warships of various classes. Their flagship is a heavy battlecruiser commanded by General Vash, one of their most experienced commanders. The Villani have sent desperate messages begging for help, but..." Vale's voice trailed off. "But you don't think anyone can save them," Blake finished. "The mathematics are clear. 50 Krex warships against whatever force we could send would result in heavy Coalition losses with little chance of success. The Krex have chosen their target well. The Villani system has 3 inhabited planets, all focused on agriculture and research. No military installations, no defensive platforms, no way to fight back." Blake stood and walked to the large window overlooking Earth's orbital shipyards. Dozens of human vessels moved between the construction platforms, some heading out on patrol missions, others returning from deep space assignments. Earth's fleet had grown significantly since joining the Coalition, but it was still small compared to the older member species. "What exactly are you asking of us, Ambassador?" "We need Earth to send whatever ships you can spare to Villani space. We know it is a difficult request. Human vessels are not designed for large-scale combat, and your crews lack experience in major battles. But the Villani face extinction if no one helps them." Blake considered the situation carefully. Vale was right about human ships being different from Coalition designs. While other species built massive vessels filled with energy weapons and particle shields, Earth's military had developed along different lines. Human ships were smaller, faster, and designed around different tactical principles. "I need to speak with command," Blake said. "Give me 6 hours for a response." "Of course, but please understand. Every hour that passes means more Villani deaths. Their agricultural worlds are being bombed into dust. Their research stations are being captured or destroyed. An entire peaceful civilization is being wiped out while we discuss options." The transmission ended, leaving Blake alone with his thoughts. He immediately opened a secure channel to Earth's United Defense Command headquarters in Geneva. Admiral Kane appeared on the screen within minutes. The old military commander had seen action in Earth's final wars before the planet united, and his experience showed in his weathered face and sharp eyes. "I saw the coalition request," Kane said without waiting for Blake to speak. "What's your assessment?" "The situation is as bad as they say. The Villani are completely defenseless, and the Kreks have overwhelming force. Coalition command admits they can't spare ships from other fronts." Kane nodded slowly. "And they want us to throw our ships against 50 enemy warships in a hopeless battle to make themselves feel better about abandoning an ally. That seems to be the idea, sir, though I think they genuinely care about the Villani." Vale seemed desperate. "Vale is a good man, but he's thinking like a coalition officer. Big fleets, direct battles, overwhelming force." Kane leaned back in his chair. "That's not how we do things." Blake waited. Kane had something in mind. His expression showed the same look he got when planning complex operations. "Send a message to Vale," Kane said finally. "Tell him Earth will respond to the Villani." "Request for aid. Sir, what ships are you planning to send?" Kane smiled, and Blake suddenly felt sorry for the Kreks Empire. "One ship, Commander, we're sending one ship." "One ship against 50? Blake couldn't hide his shock. "Admiral, that's not just hopeless, it's suicide." "Is it?" The coalition thinks in terms of massive fleets and direct confrontation. They assume the only way to fight 50 ships is with 50 ships of your own. Kane's smile grew wider. "But what if there was another way? What if you could eliminate 50 ships with just one?" Blake began to understand. Earth's military doctrine had always been different from their new allies. While other species focused on building bigger weapons and stronger shields, humans had perfected the art of not being seen until it was too late. "You're sending the Reaper," Blake said. "The Reaper leaves in 12 hours. Captain Ross has already been briefed. The Villani will have their aid, Commander, and the galaxy is about to learn something important about human warfare." Blake felt a chill of anticipation mixed with worry. The Reaper was humanity's most classified project, a ship built around principles that other species had never considered. If it worked, the Villani would be saved. If it failed, the galaxy would watch humanity's newest warship die in a hopeless battle. "What should I tell Ambassador Vale about our capabilities?" Kane's expression became serious. "Tell him we're sending our best ship with our best crew. Tell him the Villani will be protected. But don't tell him how we plan to do it. Some things are better demonstrated than explained." As the communication ended, Blake wondered if they were making the right choice. One human ship against an entire Kreks battle fleet seemed impossible. But then again, humans had always specialized in making the impossible look easy. The Villani's desperate plea for help was about to be answered in a way no one expected. The Coalition war room on Station Alpha hummed with tension as Admiral Kane's message played for the third time. Ambassador Vale stared at the holographic display, his blue skin showing patches of darker color that indicated stress among his species. "One ship?" General Torres from the Altarian Defense Force spoke first, his forearms gesturing in disbelief. "The humans are sending one ship against 50 Kreks warships?" Vale nodded slowly. "That is what Admiral Kane confirmed. The Earth vessel called Reaper will depart for Villani space within hours." Commander Nix, the Coalition's senior tactical officer, pulled up Earth's known ship specifications on the main screen. "According to our records, human vessels are small compared to standard Coalition designs. Their largest ships carry maybe 40 crew members. How can one small ship make any difference?" "Perhaps the humans are planning a suicide mission," suggested Captain Oral, whose species valued honor above survival. "A final glorious charge to buy the Villani more time to evacuate." Vale shook his head. "I spoke with Admiral Kane personally. He seemed confident, not desperate. He specifically said the Villani would be protected, not just avenged." General Torres laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "Protected? 50 Kreks warships versus one small human vessel? The mathematics are clear. This Kane is either insane or lying." Meanwhile, 3 systems away, Captain Ross walked through the corridors of the UES Reaper for what might be his final inspection. The ship looked nothing like the massive Coalition cruisers with their bright hulls and decorative designs. The Reaper was angular, dark, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Final systems check, Lieutenant Park," Ross said to his tactical officer. Park looked up from her console, her young face serious. "All stealth systems operational, Captain. Quantum field generators at full capacity. Weapon systems armed and ready." Ross nodded and continued to the engine room, where Chief Engineer Murphy was making last-minute adjustments to the ship's most important system. "How's our ghost protocol, Chief?" Murphy grinned, his hands covered in grease from the advanced machinery. "Better than ever, Captain. We can stay invisible for weeks if needed. The new quantum processors are running perfectly. And the weapons? The plasma railguns are calibrated for maximum penetration. Quantum torpedoes are loaded and ready. If we can get close enough, we can punch through any armor the Kreks have." Ross walked to the bridge where his crew of 30 specialists waited. Each person had been chosen for their expertise in stealth operations, precision targeting, and silent running. They were not the largest crew in Earth's fleet, but they were the deadliest. "Listen up," Ross announced. "In 6 hours, we'll drop out of hyperspace at the edge of Volani system. Intelligence reports 50 Kreks ships maintaining a blockade around the inhabited planets. Our job is simple: eliminate the threat and save the Volani." Navigator Chen raised her hand. "Captain, how do we engage 50 ships with favorable odds?" Rossi smiled the same cold smile that Admiral Kane had shown earlier. "We don't engage 50 ships, Chen. We engage one ship 50 times." The crew exchanged glances. They had trained for this type of mission, but never against such overwhelming numbers. Still, they trusted their captain and their ship. The Reaper had never failed a mission. Back on Station Alpha, Ambassador Vale received another desperate transmission from Volani Prime. The image showed Dr. Keela, the Volani senior scientist, speaking from what appeared to be an underground shelter. "Ambassador Vale, the situation grows worse by the hour. The Kreks have destroyed our orbital farms and are beginning surface bombardment of our cities. Our population centers are defenseless. We have perhaps 10 days before our people face complete extinction." Vale's translator could barely convey the emotion in Dr. Keela's voice. The Volani were a gentle species, never having developed weapons or military tactics. They had joined the coalition believing that their peaceful nature and valuable agricultural knowledge would protect them. Now they were paying the price for their trust. "Dr. Keela, help is coming. Earth has dispatched a warship to your system." "One ship?" Dr. Keela's hope visibly dimmed. "Ambassador, our sensors show 50 Kreks vessels in our system. How can one ship help us?" Vale wished he had a better answer. "The humans are different in their approach to warfare. We must trust their judgment." After the transmission ended, Vale contacted Coalition Command on the core worlds. Fleet Admiral Zorn appeared on screen, his reptilian features showing frustration. "Vale, I've reviewed the human response to your request. Sending one ship is either the bravest or most foolish decision I've witnessed in 40 years of military service. What if they have some new technology we don't know about?" Vale suggested. "Impossible. Coalition observers have inspected human shipyards. Their vessels are small, lightly armed compared to our standards. They focus on speed and maneuverability, rather than heavy weapons or strong shields." Admiral Zorn pulled up a tactical display showing the Volani system. "The Kreks have positioned their fleet perfectly. Their flagship, the Dominator, sits at the center of a defensive formation. General Vash is an experienced commander who has never lost a battle. Even if the humans had 10 ships, victory would be unlikely." Vale studied the enemy formation. The Kreks ships formed overlapping fields of fire around each inhabited planet. Any attacking force would face the combined firepower of the entire fleet from multiple directions. "Perhaps we should send what ships we can spare," Vale suggested. "Even a small coalition force might make the difference." "And lose precious vessels in a hopeless battle?" "Vale, I understand your concern for the Volani, but military logic must prevail. The human ship will likely be destroyed within minutes of entering the system. We cannot compound that tragedy by sending more ships to die uselessly. As the call ended, Vale felt the weight of failure. The Coalition was abandoning the Volani to their fate, and Earth's single ship would die trying to save them. Unless Vale accessed Earth's communication files, looking for any clue about this mysterious vessel called Reaper. The information was surprisingly limited. Earth classified most details about the ship, releasing only basic specifications that seemed unremarkable. But Vale noticed something interesting in the technical reports. Earth's ships used different design principles than Coalition vessels. Where other species built ships to fight in the open, human design seemed focused on avoiding detection. Their weapons were built for precision rather than raw power. Their engines were designed for silence rather than speed. Vale had fought in several wars before joining the diplomatic corps. He recognized the signs of a species that had learned warfare through necessity rather than tradition. Earth's military had developed differently because Earth itself had been different, a world where survival often depended on not being seen by your enemies. Maybe Admiral Kane was not insane after all. Maybe he understood something about warfare that the Coalition had forgotten in their centuries of traditional fleet battles. As the Reaper jumped to hyperspace, beginning its journey to Volani system, Vale sent a message to Dr. Keela with new hope in his voice. "Doctor, hold your position and keep your people safe. The ship coming to help you may be small, but I believe it carries something the Kreks have never faced before. Human military thinking." The next few days would prove whether Vale's faith was justified or whether the galaxy was about to witness humanity's most tragic failure. The UES Reaper dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Volani system, appearing as nothing more than a small metal object drifting in the darkness. Captain Ross studied the tactical display showing 50 red dots arranged around 3 blue planets, the Kreks fleet maintaining their blockade of the Volani worlds. "Passive sensors only," Ross ordered quietly. "I want a complete picture before we make our move." Lieutenant Park worked at her station, gathering information from the enemy fleet. "Captain, the Kreks have arranged their ships in 3 defensive groups, 20 vessels around Volani Prime, 15 around the agricultural world of Volani 2, and the remaining 15 protecting their supply lines." "Perfect," Ross said with satisfaction. "They're thinking like traditional fleet commanders. Strong, defensive positions overlapping fields of fire textbook formation." Navigator Chen looked confused. "Sir, how is that perfect? They have us outnumbered and outgunned." Ross turned to face his crew. "Because they're fighting the last war, not this one. They expect us to charge in with guns blazing, trying to break their formation with superior firepower. They have no idea what they're really facing." On the Kreks flagship Dominator, General Vash received reports from his sensor operators. The large alien commander stood over 8 feet tall, his armor decorated with symbols representing his many victories. His red eyes glowed with predatory satisfaction as he reviewed the tactical situation. "General, our outer sensors detect a small vessel at the system's edge," reported his tactical officer, Major Kren. "It appears to be disabled or powered down." Vash studied the sensor reading with mild interest. "Human design?" "Yes, General. Much smaller than expected Coalition specifications. It matches the profile of vessels we've observed in their patrol fleets." "One ship?" Vash laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. "The Great Coalition sends one tiny vessel to save the Volani. This is either an insult or a joke." Major Kren hesitated. "Should we investigate, General? Why waste ammunition on a crippled ship? Let it drift. We have more important targets." Vash gestured toward the planet below, where Kreks bombers were systematically destroying Volani cities. "Continue the bombardment. I want this system conquered within the week." What the Kreks didn't realize was that the disabled human ship was anything but helpless. The Reaper's advanced sensors were mapping every enemy vessel, recording their positions, weapon systems, crew complements, and defensive capabilities. "Sensor sweep complete," Park reported. "I have detailed profiles on all 50 ships. Their flagship appears to be a heavy battlecruiser with enhanced armor and weapons. The smaller vessels are standard Kreks destroyers and frigates." "Excellent. Chief Murphy, how are our stealth systems? Murphy's voice came through the comm from engineering. All systems green, Captain. We're running completely silent. Their sensors read us as space debris. Ross studied the enemy formation. For several minutes, his tactical mind working through different approaches. The Kreks had positioned themselves well for a traditional battle, but they had made one critical mistake. They had no idea they were being hunted. Here's how we do this, Ross announced. We start with the outer patrol ships. Single targets, isolated from the main fleet. We eliminate them quietly one at a time before moving to the core defensive groups. Captain, Chen asked nervously, what if they detect us during the first attack? Then we adapt. But if we do this right, they won't know we're here until it's too late. The Reaper began moving silently through the asteroid field that bordered the Villani system. Its stealth technology bent light and absorbed sensor signals, making it virtually invisible to conventional detection methods. Only the most advanced coalition ships had similar capabilities, and the Kreks had never encountered anything like it. Ross selected his first target, a Kreks destroyer patrolling alone near the outer planets. The ship was positioned to watch for approaching coalition fleets, but its crew was relaxed, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. Take us to attack position, Ross ordered. Weapons hot, but maintain stealth until I give the command. The Reaper approached to within 2 kilometers of the enemy destroyer before Ross gave the signal. Fire! The plasma railgun discharged with a brilliant flash, sending a concentrated beam of superheated matter through the Krek ship's hull. The enemy vessel exploded in seconds, its crew never knowing what hit them. Target destroyed, Park reported. No distress signal transmitted. Good. Next target. The second Krek ship met the same fate 20 minutes later. Then the third. Each attack was perfectly executed. The Reaper would appear from nowhere, destroy its target, and vanish before any other ships could respond. On the Dominator, General Vash was reviewing bombardment reports when Major Kren approached with disturbing news. General, we've lost contact with 3 patrol ships in the outer system. Vash looked up from his reports. Equipment failure? Unknown, sir. They simply stopped responding. No distress signals, no indication of problems. Send a squadron to investigate. 4 Kreks vessels moved toward the last known position of the missing patrol ships. They found nothing but debris fields where their comrades had been. General, the squadron leader reported, all 3 ships have been completely destroyed. Weapons signatures suggest high-energy plasma discharge, but we detect no enemy vessels in the area. Vash felt his first moment of concern. 3 ships, destroyed without warning, without any sign of the attacker. This was not how space battles were supposed to work. Recall all outer patrols, Titan formation around the planets. But Ross had anticipated this move. As the Krek ships pulled back into defensive positions, they created exactly the opportunity he needed. They're bunching up, Park observed. Tighter formation, less maneuvering room. Perfect. Time for Phase 2. Ross studied the new enemy positions. Target their supply ships first, cut off their fuel and ammunition, and the whole fleet becomes vulnerable. The Reaper struck again, this time targeting a supply convoy moving between the main fleet and their base. 3 cargo vessels exploded in quick succession, their stored ammunition creating spectacular secondary explosions that lit up the darkness. This time, the Kreks were ready. Sensors tracked the weapon signatures back to their source, revealing a small contact moving impossibly fast through the debris field. There, Major Kren shouted. Small vessel bearing 27 Mark IV, all ships open fire. Dozens of energy beams converged on the Reaper's position, but the human ship was already gone, vanishing into the asteroid field like a ghost. General Vash stared at the tactical display in growing anger and confusion. What kind of ship can appear and disappear like that? Unknown, General. It's using some form of advanced stealth technology. Our sensors can only track it when it fires its weapons. Vash realized he was facing something completely outside his experience. This was not a traditional fleet battle with predictable tactics and formations. This was something else entirely, a new kind of warfare that turned all his advantages into weaknesses. Send a message to Krek's command, Vash ordered. Tell them, we need reinforcements immediately. We're fighting an enemy that doesn't follow the rules of conventional warfare. But as the message traveled across space, the Reaper continued its deadly work. 7 Krex ships were already destroyed, and Captain Ross was just getting started. The hunter had revealed itself, and the prey was beginning to understand they were not the predators they thought they were. General Vash paced the bridge of the Dominator like a caged animal, his red eyes fixed on the tactical display. In the past 6 hours, he had lost 12 ships to an enemy he couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't fight using conventional tactics. And status report, he demanded from Major Kren. We've pulled all remaining ships into tight defensive formations around each planet. No vessel operates alone anymore. But General... Kren hesitated. The crews are becoming afraid. They call the human ship a ghost vessel that strikes from nowhere. Vash slammed his clawed fist onto the command console. There are no ghosts in space. It's one small ship with some kind of stealth technology. We will find it and destroy it. Unknown to the Krex commander, the ghost ship was currently drifting silently through the massive asteroid field that surrounded the Volani system. Captain Ross studied the updated enemy positions with satisfaction. Fear was making the Krex commanders predictable. They're grouping their ships closer together, observed Lieutenant Park. Defensive formations around each planet. Exactly what I hoped they would do, Ross replied. Scared enemies make tactical mistakes. Chief Murphy, how are our stealth systems holding up? Running at 95% efficiency, Captain. We can stay hidden for days if needed. The Krex sensors are designed to track large fleets, not single ships using our technology. Ross nodded and turned to his tactical officer. Park, I want you to identify their command and control vessels. Every fleet has ships that coordinate communications and sensor data. If we eliminate those, their formations will become confused. Already on it, Captain. I've identified 3 ships that seem to be acting as communication hubs for their fleet groupings. The Reaper began moving toward its next target, a heavily armed cruiser positioned to coordinate the defense of Volani 2. The ship was surrounded by 6 smaller vessels in a protective formation, but Ross had learned that even the best formations had weaknesses. On the targeted cruiser, Captain Drex was reviewing patrol reports when his sensor officer called out an alarm. Sir, I'm detecting some kind of energy signature moving through the asteroid field. It's very faint, almost like background radiation. Drex studied his screens carefully. Could it be the stealth ship that's been attacking our forces? Possible, sir. The signature keeps appearing and disappearing. If it is a ship, it's using technology we've never encountered. Alert all vessels in our formation. If that's the human ship, it's coming for us. But the Reaper was already in position. Ross had positioned his ship inside a large asteroid, using the rock as both cover and camouflage. The Krex sensors detected nothing unusual about the asteroid, never suspecting it contained a predator waiting to strike. Target the cruiser's main communications array, Ross ordered. I want them blind and deaf before we eliminate them. The plasma railgun fired through a hole in the asteroid, the beam striking the Krex cruiser's sensor array with perfect precision. Instantly, the ship lost contact with its escort vessels and the main fleet. Communications down, the Krex sensor officer reported in panic. We're blind. Captain Drex tried to maintain order. Emergency communications. Alert the fleet that we're under attack. But before the message could be sent, quantum torpedoes phased through the cruiser's armor and exploded inside the ship's reactor core. The vessel disappeared in a brilliant explosion that could be seen across the system. The 6 escort ships immediately began firing randomly into the asteroid field. Their crews panicked by the sudden loss of their command vessel, but their weapons struck only empty space and floating rocks. The Reaper had already moved to its next hunting ground. General Vash received the news of another loss with growing fury and fear. 13 ships destroyed, and we haven't even damaged the enemy. How is this possible? General, Major Kren said, carefully, perhaps we should request additional reinforcements from the home fleet. I've already sent for reinforcements, but they won't arrive for 3 days. We need a new strategy now. Vash studied the tactical display, trying to think like his mysterious enemy. The human ship struck isolated targets, attacked communication, hubs and disappeared before retaliation was possible. It was fighting like a submarine rather than a space warship. New orders, Vash announced. All ships will move in groups of at least 4. No vessel operates alone. We'll create overlapping sensor nets that will detect any stealth ship, no matter how advanced. The Krex fleet began repositioning into smaller, tighter groups. It was exactly what Ross had hoped they would do. They're breaking up their formations, Park reported. Smaller groups, but more of them. Perfect, Ross said with satisfaction. Smaller groups are easier to eliminate, and they're so focused on watching for us they're not watching each other. The Reaper struck again, this time targeting a group of 4 ships that had separated from the main fleet. Using a tactic learned from ancient submarine warfare, Ross positioned his ship between 2 asteroid clusters and waited for his prey to come to him. The Krex ships moved through the asteroid field in tight formation, their sensors sweeping constantly for signs of the stealth ship. They never detected the Reaper sitting motionless in the shadow of a large rock. Multiple targets locked, Park reported. Quantum torpedoes ready. Fire all tubes. 8 quantum torpedoes launched simultaneously, each one programmed to phase through solid matter and explode inside a different target. 4 Krex ships exploded within seconds of each other, their crews never knowing they had sailed into a trap. 17 ships down, Park announced. 33 remaining. Ross smiled grimly. The numbers are getting better, but they're still dangerous. Time to try something different. The captain decided to target the Krex supply base, a heavily fortified station hidden in the outer asteroid belt. The station was protected by orbital weapons platforms and patrolled by 8 warships, but it was also the source of fuel and ammunition for the entire fleet. If we eliminate their supply base, their remaining ships become sitting ducks, Ross explained to his crew. But this will be our most dangerous attack yet. The station has heavy defenses, and we'll have to fight in the open. Navigator Chen looked worried. Captain, if we lose our stealth advantage, we'll be outnumbered 8-1. True, but sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight. Trust me, Chen. We're going to show the Krex something they've never seen before. The Reaper began moving toward the supply station, its crew preparing for their most challenging battle yet. Behind them, General Vash was coordinating a desperate search for the ghost ship that was systematically destroying his fleet. Neither side knew that the final phase of this strange battle was about to begin, and the outcome would change how the galaxy viewed human warfare forever. The predator was moving in for the kill, but the prey still had teeth. The Krex supply station Fortress 7 hung in the darkness like a metal spider, its 8 massive weapon platforms extending outward from a central hub. General Vash had positioned his most experienced ships here, 8 heavy cruisers commanded by his best captains. This was his last major stronghold, and he knew the ghost ship would come for it eventually. Captain Ross studied the fortified position through the Reaper's advanced sensors. The station was impressive, bristling with particle cannons and missile launchers. Any conventional attack would face overwhelming firepower from multiple directions. Tactical analysis complete, reported Lieutenant Park. The station has 46 heavy weapons and energy shields rated for fleet-level combat. The 8 defending ships are positioned in overlapping defensive patterns. Formidable, Ross admitted, but they're thinking defensively again. They've built a fortress, but fortresses can become prisons. Chief Murphy's voice came through the comm from engineering. Captain, our stealth systems are running hot after all the recent battles. We can maintain invisibility for maybe 2 more hours before we need to power down for maintenance. Ross nodded grimly. This would be their final attack using stealth advantage. After this, they would have to fight openly or retreat. Understood, Chief. We'll make these 2 hours count. The Reaper began its approach to Fortress 7, moving through the dense asteroid field that surrounded the station. Ross had studied the defensive patterns carefully and found the weakness he needed. The Krex had positioned their ships to protect against large fleet attacks, leaving small gaps that a single vessel might exploit. On the station's command deck, Colonel Thex monitored his sensor displays with growing tension. Every officer in the Krex fleet knew about the mysterious human ship that had destroyed 17 vessels without taking any damage. Some crews were calling it supernatural, a demon ship that could not be killed. "Sir, our perimeter sensors are detecting unusual energy fluctuations in Sector 7, reported his sensor operator. "Investigate immediately. Send 2 ships to sweep that area." 2 Krex cruisers moved toward the energy readings, their crews alert for any sign of the stealth ship. They found nothing but empty space and floating asteroids. What they didn't realize was that their target was already inside their defensive perimeter, hiding in the shadow of the station itself. Ross had positioned the Reaper directly beneath Fortress 7, using the station's own bulk to block sensor detection. It was a dangerous position. If discovered, they would face the full firepower of 8 ships plus the station's weapons. But it was also the perfect position for a surprise attack. "Target the station's main reactor core," Ross ordered. "I want maximum damage with our first shot." "Captain," Navigator Chen said nervously, "if we attack the station, we'll be exposed to return fire from all 8 ships. Our shields won't hold against that much firepower." Ross smiled with cold confidence. "Chen, you're thinking like a coalition officer. Watch and learn how humans fight when the odds are impossible." The plasma railgun fired directly upward through the station's hull, the superheated beam punching through armor and striking the main reactor. Massive explosions ripped through Fortress 7 as secondary systems overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. "Station hit," Park reported. "Major damage to their reactor core." But Ross wasn't finished. As the Krex ships turned to attack his position, he fired quantum torpedoes at the nearest cruiser while simultaneously launching the Reaper away from the station at maximum acceleration. The Krex return fire struck empty space where the human ship had been moments before. But instead of disappearing like before, the Reaper remained visible, its stealth systems finally overloaded by the intense combat. "There it is," Colonel Thex shouted from the damaged station. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel." 8 Krex cruisers opened fire simultaneously, filling space with deadly energy beams and missile salvos. But something strange happened. Instead of trying to dodge or retreat, the human ship flew directly into the storm of weapons fire. "What are they doing?" demanded Captain Vorth from the lead Krex ship. "They're flying straight into our weapons." The answer became clear within seconds. The Reaper's hull began adapting to each weapon that struck it. Energy beams that should have penetrated the armor were absorbed and redirected. Missiles that should have caused massive damage barely scratched. The surface? Impossible. Colonel Thex stared at his tactical display. "Their armor is becoming stronger with each hit." Chief Murphy's voice echoed through the Reaper's bridge as he monitored the adaptive armor systems. "Reactive plating is working perfectly, Captain. Each weapon strike teaches our armor how to defend against the next one." Ross had saved this secret for the final battle. The Reaper's experimental adaptive armor was humanity's answer to superior alien firepower. Instead of building thicker armor, human engineers had created armor that learned from damage and became stronger against repeated attacks. "All weapons, focus fire on their flagship," Ross ordered. "Time to end this." The Reaper charged directly at the largest Krex cruiser, its weapons firing continuously. The enemy ship's shields collapsed under the focused assault, and plasma beams tore through its hull. The mighty vessel exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the asteroid field. One by one, the remaining Krex ships fell before the relentless human attack. Their weapons became less effective with each shot, while the Reaper's adaptive armor made it nearly invulnerable. What had started as 8-to-1 odds quickly became a one-sided massacre. General Vash watched the destruction of his supply base. From the bridge of the Dominator, his red eyes wide with disbelief. In less than 30 minutes, the human ship had destroyed Fortress 7 and eliminated 8 of his best vessels. "General," Major Kren said quietly, "we've lost over half our fleet. Maybe we should consider alternative options." Vash understood what his second-in-command was suggesting. The unthinkable, surrender. In his long military career, he had never retreated from any battle. But he had also never faced an enemy like this. "Open a communication channel to the human ship," Vash said finally. Captain Ross received the transmission with satisfaction. The great General Vash appeared on his screen, his proud features now showing defeat and exhaustion. Human Commander, I am General Vash of the Krex Empire. I am request terms for the cessation of hostilities. The terms are simple, Ross replied. Withdraw all Krex forces from Volani space immediately. Release any prisoners you have taken. Pay reparations for the damage you have caused to Volani worlds. Vash's pride warred with reality. His remaining ships were demoralized, his supply lines cut, and facing an enemy he could not defeat. And if we refuse? Ross's expression remained coldly professional. Then I continue destroying your ships until none remain. Your choice, General. The Krex commander closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with resignation. We accept your terms. All Krex forces will withdraw from this system within 6 hours. As the beaten Krex fleet began its retreat, Captain Ross opened a channel to Volani Prime. Dr. Kayla's face appeared on screen, tears of joy streaming down her gentle features. Captain Ross, you have saved our entire civilization. How can we ever repay such a debt? No payment necessary, Doctor. The Coalition protects its members, that's what we do. But across the galaxy, the news of one human ship defeating an entire Krex fleet was spreading like wildfire. On dozens of worlds, alien governments were quietly abandoning their aggressive expansion plans. Applications for Coalition membership from previously hostile species began flooding diplomatic channels. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, not through massive fleets or overwhelming force, but through one ship proving that humanity approached warfare with terrifying intelligence and innovation. Admiral Kane received Ross's final report with quiet satisfaction. The Volani were safe, the Krex Empire had learned respect for Coalition territory, and the galaxy now understood that Earth's small fleet was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The age of human military reputation had begun with a single word that would echo across the stars: Reaper. The stars looked peaceful through the window of the Pioneer's Edge. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the distant lights twinkle in the darkness of space. His ship was small compared to the big military vessels, but it was home to him and his crew. Jake, we're getting some strange readings from Sector 7, Dr. Lisa Park called from her science station. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. It's not like anything in our database. Jake walked over to look at her screen. Numbers and graphs filled the display, but they didn't make much sense to him. That was Lisa's job. She was the smartest person he knew when it came to alien life forms. Could be a new species, she said, excitement clear in her voice. The energy patterns are completely different from what we've seen before. Tom Hayes, their navigator, looked up from his station. Should we go take a look? We're here to explore, right? Jake thought for a moment. They were far from Earth, deeper in space than most humans had ever gone. Their mission was to study new forms of life, but they had to be careful. Space was full of dangers. Set course for the readings, Jake decided. But keep our shields up and weapons ready. The Pioneer's Edge turned toward the unknown signals. It took 3 hours to reach the location. What they found there made everyone on the bridge go quiet. A massive ship hung in space before them. It was unlike anything humans had ever built. The hull was dark and smooth with strange curves that hurt to look at. Green lights pulsed along its surface like a heartbeat. It's huge, Tom whispered. At least 10 times bigger than us. Lisa's instruments were going crazy. I'm reading life signs, but they're not like anything in our files. The biological patterns are completely alien. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. First contact with an alien species was supposed to be carefully planned. Teams of diplomats and scientists were supposed to handle it, not 3 people in a small research ship. Try to communicate, he ordered. Send them our standard greeting signals. Lisa worked at her station, sending out mathematical sequences and peaceful messages in every frequency they knew. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then the alien ship responded. The response wasn't words or numbers. It was a pulse of energy that hit their ship like a hammer blow. Every system on the Pioneer's Edge went dead at once. The lights went out. The engines stopped. Even the air recycling system shut down. Emergency power kicked in, bathing the bridge in red light. Jake could hear Tom cursing as he tried to restart the engines. They disabled us completely. Lisa said, her voice shaking. Whatever they used, it shut down every electronic system we have. Through the window, Jake watched the alien ship move closer. It was so big that it blocked out the stars. Strange panels opened along its hull, and smaller craft began to emerge. They're boarding. Us, Tom said, looking at his scanner. Multiple contacts moving through the ship. Jake grabbed the emergency weapons locker and handed out the pistols inside. Lisa, can you get the escape pods working? I'm trying, but the power systems are completely fried. It'll take time. The sound of metal being cut came from somewhere. In the ship, the aliens were coming through the hull itself. How long? Jake asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. They didn't have 15 minutes. The cutting sounds were getting closer. Jake could hear footsteps in the corridors now, but they didn't sound like human feet. They made clicking sounds, like giant insects walking on metal. Jake, Lisa said quietly, whatever happens, you need to know something. I've been monitoring their communications. They're not trying to talk to us. They're studying us like we're animals in a lab. Before Jake could ask what she meant, the bridge door exploded inward. The aliens came through the opening like a flood of nightmares. They were tall, taller than any human, with bodies covered in hard, shell-like armor. Their faces had too many eyes, all black and shining. Instead of hands, they had claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. When they moved, they made that clicking sound Jake had heard in the corridors. One of them, bigger than the rest, stepped forward. It tilted its head and made a series of rapid clicks. The others responded with similar sounds. Jake raised his weapon. But before he could fire, one of the aliens pointed a strange device at him. A beam of blue light hit him, and suddenly he couldn't move. His muscles locked up completely. He could see and hear everything, but his body wouldn't obey him. The same thing happened to Lisa and Tom. The aliens gathered around them, making more of those clicking sounds. Jake got the feeling they were discussing what to do with their captives. The big alien moved closer to Jake. It reached out with one clawed hand and touched his face. The touch was cold and rough. Jake wanted to pull away, but he couldn't move. More clicking sounds. Then the alien did something that made Jake's blood freeze. It pulled out a small device and held it near Jake's head. The device made a soft humming sound, and suddenly Jake could understand what the aliens were saying. This one is in better condition, the big alien said. Its voice was like metal scraping against stone. The others show signs of damage from the neural disruptor. Should we take all three? Another alien asked. No. The research facility has limited space. We only need one specimen for the initial studies. This one will do. Jake realized with growing horror that they weren't treating him like a person. To them, he was just a thing to be studied. The big alien looked at Lisa and Tom. Dispose of the others. Make sure their escape systems are functional first. We want them to return to their homeworld with news of what happened here. Why? One of the smaller aliens asked. Fear makes specimens more interesting. When we harvest their species, they will be properly motivated. Jake tried to scream, tried to warn his friends, but the paralysis held him tight. He could only watch as the aliens dragged him away from the bridge. The last thing he saw was Lisa working frantically at her station, trying to get the escape pods online. As they carried him through the corridors of his own ship, Jake understood that his life as he knew it was over. These creatures didn't see him as a person with thoughts and feelings. To them, he was just another animal to experiment on. The clicking sounds of their language filled his ears as they brought him aboard their ship. Behind him, he heard the Pioneer's Edge powering up as Lisa got the systems working again. At least his friends might escape to warn Earth. But Jake was going somewhere else entirely, somewhere dark and terrible, where humans were nothing more than specimens in an alien laboratory. Jake woke up in a cage. The walls around him were made of some kind of clear material, stronger than glass. He was naked, and his body ached from the paralysis device the aliens had used on him. Above him, harsh white lights made everything look cold and sterile. He wasn't alone. Through the transparent walls, he could see other cages. Most were empty, but some held creatures he had never seen before. strange beings with too many limbs, or covered in scales, or floating in tanks of liquid. All of them looked as scared as he felt. The big alien from his ship appeared outside his cage. Up close, Jake could see more details that made his skin crawl. The creature's shell-like armor had patterns carved into it, and its multiple black eyes never seemed to blink all at the same time. "Subject is awake," the alien said in that metal-scraping voice. "Begin initial examinations." Two smaller aliens wheeled a cart of instruments toward Jake's cage. The tools looked medical, but wrong somehow. They were designed for bodies that weren't human. A section of the cage wall slid away. Jake backed against the far wall, but there was nowhere to go. The aliens reached in with long metal rods that had clamps on the ends. They grabbed his arms and legs, holding him still. "Please," Jake said, finding his voice. "I'm a person. I can think and feel just like you." The big alien tilted its head. "Interesting. The specimen shows signs of higher intelligence. Make note of vocal patterns and emotional responses." They didn't care that he was a person. To them, he was just an animal that could talk. The examination began. They poked him with instruments, took samples of his blood, and scanned every part of his body with strange devices. Jake gritted his teeth and tried not to give them the satisfaction of hearing him scream. But the real torture hadn't started yet. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, Lisa Park was fighting for her life aboard an Earth medical station. The neural disruptor the aliens had used damaged her brain, leaving her in a coma for weeks. When she finally woke up, the first thing she did was ask about Jake. "We have to go back for him," she told Admiral Kate Ross, who had come to debrief her as soon as the doctors said she was strong enough. Admiral Ross was a tough woman who had spent 30 years in the Earth Defense Force. She had short gray hair and scars on her hands from her time as a fighter pilot. But even she looked shaken by Lisa's report. "Dr. Park, I understand your feelings, but we have no idea where that alien ship went. Space is big and they could be anywhere. They're going to hurt him," Lisa said, tears running down her face. "You didn't hear the way they talked about him. Like he wasn't even human." Tom Hayes sat in the chair next to her bed. He had recovered, faster than Lisa, but Jake's capture had hit him hard too. "Admiral, we have to try something. Jake saved our lives by letting them take him instead." Admiral Ross looked at the reports on her tablet. The alien technology was unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their science far beyond human understanding. "I'm assembling a team to study everything you've told us," the Admiral said. "But Dr. Park, I need you to understand something. Even if we could find your friend, we don't have the technology to fight these aliens. Any rescue mission would be suicide." Lisa closed her eyes. Somewhere in the darkness of space, Jake was alone with creatures that saw him as nothing more than a lab rat. She had to find a way to help him. Jake learned what real pain felt like on his 7th day in the cage. The alien scientist, who Jake had started thinking of as the examiner, wanted to test human pain tolerance. They strapped him to a metal table and began their work. First came the needles. Long, thin instruments that they pushed into his arms and legs. Each one sent fire through his nerves. The aliens watched his face carefully, taking notes every time he gasped or cried out. "Fascinating," the examiner said. "The specimen's pain responses are far more complex than other species we have studied." They moved on to electricity. Small shocks at first, then bigger ones. Jake's muscles spasmed and his teeth clenched so hard he thought they might break. But the worst part wasn't the pain itself. It was the way the aliens treated his suffering like it was entertaining. "Note the variety of vocalizations," one of them said as Jake screamed. "This species produces sounds across a wide range of frequencies when experiencing distress." Hours passed. Jake lost count of how many different ways they hurt him. When they finally put him back in his cage. He curled up in a corner and shook. His body was covered in small wounds and burn marks. But they weren't done with him. They never seemed to be done. On Earth, Admiral Ross sat in her office reading intelligence reports. The news wasn't good. Long-range sensors had detected strange signals from deep space. Signals that matched what Dr. Park had described from the alien ship. Her aide, Captain Bill Murphy, stood at attention beside her desk. "Ma'am, the science team has finished analyzing the data from the Pioneer's Edge. They think the aliens are conducting some kind of biological survey." "What kind of survey?" "The kind you do before you harvest a crop." Admiral Ross felt ice in her stomach. "How many ships?" "Unknown. But the signal patterns suggest it's more than one. Possibly many more." The Admiral stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of Earth's capital city. Millions of people going about their lives, not knowing that somewhere in space, one of their own was being tortured by creatures who saw all of humanity as nothing more than specimens to be studied. "Start mobilizing the fleet," she said quietly, "and get me every military scientist we have. If these aliens think humans are just animals, they're about to learn how wrong they are." Jake's nightmare continued day after day. The aliens tested everything about him. How much heat he could stand, how long he could hold his breath, how his mind reacted to different drugs and chemicals. They were particularly interested in human emotions. They would show him images of Earth, of his friends, of his family, and watch how his body responded. When he cried, they collected his tears for analysis. "This specimen shows remarkable psychological complexity," the examiner noted during one session. "The emotional responses may be the key to understanding their species." But Jake noticed something the aliens didn't seem to understand. Each day of torture made him angrier instead of weaker. Each time they hurt him, his hatred for them grew stronger. Humans, he realized, were different from the other creatures in the laboratory. The other alien specimens became broken and hopeless after a few days. But Jake's spirit was getting harder, not softer. Late at night, when the laboratory was quiet, he made himself a promise. If he ever got out of this place, he would make sure his people knew what these creatures were really like. And when that happened, the aliens would learn that humans could be just as ruthless as they were. The clicking sounds of alien conversation echoed through the laboratory as Jake planned his revenge. The emergency session of the World Defense Council lasted 18 hours. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in stunned silence as Jake Morrison told his story. When he finished, the room was completely quiet. President Maria Santos of the United Americas was the first to speak. "Commander Morrison, are you certain about these invasion plans?" Jake pulled up the alien star charts on the main screen. Red lines showed the planned attack routes to Earth. "Ma'am, I spent 8 months watching them prepare. They talk about humans the way we talk about livestock." Chancellor David Wong of the Asian Federation leaned forward. "The technology gap seems impossible to overcome. How do we fight ships that can disable our vessels with a single pulse?" "We adapt," Admiral Ross said, standing up. "Dr. Park has been studying the alien technology Commander Morrison brought back. Lisa, show them what you found." Dr. Lisa Park activated her presentation. Detailed scans of alien weapons and equipment filled the screens around the room. "The aliens' technology is advanced, but it's not magic," Lisa explained. "Their energy weapons work on a specific frequency. We can build shields to block them. Their ships are faster than ours, but they're also larger and less maneuverable." She clicked to the next slide. "Most importantly, they think in patterns. Jake's intelligence shows they use the same battle tactics every time. They've never fought an enemy that could learn and change during combat." Premier Anna Volkov of the European Union stood up. "What are you suggesting, Doctor?" "I'm suggesting we give them a war they're not prepared for," Lisa said. "We build ships designed specifically to fight their weaknesses. We develop weapons that can hurt them, and we show them that humans don't follow predictable patterns." Jake stepped forward. "There's something else. The aliens I freed from their ship, they want to help. Their species were harvested just like Earth is about to be. They know alien technology, and they hate these creatures as much as we do." The room erupted in discussion. Some leaders worried about the cost. Others questioned whether humanity could unite for such a massive effort. But Jake's scarred face and the alien invasion plans were powerful arguments for action. President Santos called for order. "We need to vote. All in favor of total mobilization for the defense of Earth?" Every hand in the room went up. The next 6 months transformed human civilization. Every factory, every shipyard, every research facility on Earth was converted for war production. The usual arguments between nations disappeared when faced with extinction. Admiral Ross took command of the new Human Defense Force. Her first decision was to promote Jake Morrison to the rank of general and put him in charge of tactical planning. "You know how they think," she told him during their first strategy meeting. "That makes you our most valuable asset." Jake stood in the command center, looking at displays showing Earth's growing fleet. Hundreds of ships were under construction, each one designed to exploit alien weaknesses that he had learned during his captivity. Dr. Lisa Park worked 20-hour days in her laboratory. The alien technology Jake had stolen was like a puzzle, and she was determined to solve every piece. Her team of scientists came from every nation on Earth, united by a single goal. "We've cracked their shield technology," she reported to Jake during one of their daily meetings. "Our new plasma weapons can punch right through their defenses." "What about their speed advantage?" Jake asked. "We can't match their engines, but we don't need to. Look at this." Lisa showed him tactical simulations on her computer. "Their ships are built for hunting weak prey. They're not designed for real combat. Our smaller, faster fighters can outmaneuver them." Jake nodded. 8 months of watching the aliens had taught him they were predators, not warriors. They had never faced prey that could fight back effectively. The alien prisoners Jake had rescued became invaluable allies. The crystal being, who called itself Resonance, could understand alien technology in ways humans couldn't. The reptilian creature, named Scale by the human technicians, knew the locations of alien bases throughout the galaxy. The Harvest ships gather at a staging point before attacking, Scale explained through a translation device. "If you can hit them there, you can cripple their entire operation." Jake studied the star chart Scale had provided. The staging point was in deep space, far from any inhabited system. It would be the perfect place for a surprise attack. Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb took command of the Human Expeditionary Force 6 months after the mobilization began. He was a career military officer with gray hair and steady hands, chosen because he understood both space combat and human psychology. "General Morrison," Admiral Webb said during their first meeting, "I've read your reports. This fleet you're asking me to command, it's not just a military force, it's a statement." Jake looked out the window at the massive shipyard orbiting Earth. Hundreds of vessels were docked there, from tiny fighters to massive battleships. But more impressive was what they represented, every human nation working together for survival. "Admiral, those aliens made one critical mistake. They think humans are just clever animals. They're about to learn we're something much more dangerous." The fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever built. Fast attack ships designed to swarm, larger vessels, battleships armed with weapons that could crack open alien hulls, support vessels carrying everything needed for a long campaign in deep space. But the most important ship was the Retribution, Admiral Webb's flagship. Built around the hull of an old colony ship, it carried not just weapons but a message. Painted on its side in letters large enough to read from space were the words, "We remember." Jake requested to join the mission despite his traumatic experiences. The military psychologist said he wasn't ready for combat, but Admiral Ross overruled them. "He's earned the right to be there," she said. "Besides, we need someone who understands the enemy." Jake underwent surgery to repair the worst damage from his captivity. Cybernetic implants replaced damaged nerves and organs. The doctor said the procedures would make him stronger than before, but Jake knew the real strength came from something else. The night before the fleet's departure, Jake stood in his quarters, looking at Earth through the porthole. Somewhere out there, the aliens were preparing to harvest his entire species. They thought humans were weak creatures who would submit to capture and experimentation. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The departure ceremony was broadcast to every human settlement in the solar system. 7 billion people watched, as the Human Expeditionary Force prepared to carry the war to the enemy. Admiral Webb's voice carried across space as he addressed both the fleet and humanity. "We go not as conquerors, but as protectors. These aliens see us as animals to be harvested. Today, We show them what humans really are. Jake stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching Earth fall behind them. His reflection in the window showed a man changed by suffering, but strengthened by purpose. The scars on his face were reminders of what the aliens were capable of, but also symbols of human endurance. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying humanity's anger toward the stars. Behind them, Earth's factories continued building. More ships, more weapons, more tools of war. The aliens had wanted to study human nature. They were about to get a very thorough lesson. Jake had been counting days by watching the aliens' work schedule. 8 months had passed since his capture. 8 months of pain, experiments, and torture that had changed him into something harder than the man who once commanded the pioneers. Edge. His body was covered in scars now, some from the aliens' instruments, others from his own attempts to escape. But his mind was sharper than ever. Every day in the laboratory had taught him something new about his captors. The aliens followed. Patterns. They were creatures of habit, and habits could be exploited. The chance came during what the aliens called a stellar event. Jake didn't understand the science, but he could see the results. Strange lights flashed outside the laboratory windows, and the ship's power systems began to fluctuate. "Emergency protocols in effect," announced a voice over the ship's communication system. "All non-essential personnel report to safety stations." The examiner looked annoyed as alarms began sounding throughout the laboratory. "Postpone today's experiments," it told the other aliens. "Secure all specimens and equipment." Most of the aliens left the laboratory, leaving only 2 guards to watch the prisoners. Jake had been waiting for a moment like this for months. He had been practicing. Every night when the aliens thought he was sleeping, Jake had been working on loosening a bolt in his cage wall. It was small progress, but 8 months of patient work had finally paid off. The bolt was almost free. When the next power surge hit the ship, Jake made his move. The lights flickered, and in that moment of darkness he pulled the bolt completely loose. A section of his cage wall came free, just enough for him to squeeze through. The first guard didn't even see him coming. Jake had learned to move silently, and 8 months of anger gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. He grabbed the alien's weapon and struck it down before it could raise an alarm. The second guard turned toward the noise, but Jake was already moving. The alien weapon felt strange in his hands, but he figured out the trigger quickly enough. The blue energy beam that had once paralyzed him now served his purposes. With both guards down, Jake faced a choice. He could try to escape immediately, or he could do something that might save other lives. Around him, dozens of cages held prisoners from other worlds. All of them had suffered just like he had. Jake started opening cages. The other prisoners were weak, but they understood freedom when they saw it. A reptilian creature with intelligent eyes nodded to Jake in what he hoped was gratitude. A being that looked like it was made of living crystal chimed softly as it floated out of its prison. "The ship plans," Jake said to a creature that seemed to understand human speech. "Where do they keep their star charts and data?" The creature pointed toward a heavily secured section of the laboratory. Jake had seen the aliens go there often, always carrying data tablets and speaking in excited clicks. Getting there wouldn't be easy, but Jake had learned patience. He moved through the ship like a ghost, using the chaos of the stellar event to mask his movements. The aliens were so busy dealing with their emergency that they didn't notice one escaped specimen moving through their corridors. The secured section was protected by locks that Jake couldn't break, but the freed prisoners could. The crystal being's touch made metal brittle, and the reptilian creature's claws could tear through weakened barriers like paper. Inside, Jake found something that made his blood turn cold. The room was full of star charts, but not just any charts. These showed Earth's location, Earth's defenses, and detailed plans for something the aliens called the Great Harvest. Thousands of human beings would be captured and brought to laboratories like this one. Earth would become a breeding ground for experimental subjects. But there was more. The aliens had files on dozens of other species they had already harvested. Entire civilizations reduced to scattered survivors while their people became specimens in alien laboratories. Jake gathered every piece of data he could carry. The other prisoners helped, understanding that this information was important even if they couldn't read it. The journey back to the escape pods was harder. The stellar event was ending, and more aliens were returning to their posts. Jake and his companions had to fight their way through several groups of guards. Jake discovered something during those fights. 8 months of torture had made him ruthless, in ways he never thought possible. When aliens tried to recapture him, he didn't hesitate to kill them. Every scar on his body was a reason to show no mercy. The escape pods were designed for aliens, not humans, but Jake managed to make one work. As he prepared to launch, he looked back at the laboratory ship one last time. "This isn't over," he whispered to himself. Not by a long shot. The escape pod was found 3 days later by a human patrol vessel near the outer colonies. When the rescue team opened it, they barely recognized the man inside as human. Jake had lost 40 pounds. His hair had gone completely gray, and his eyes held a hardness that made even veteran soldiers look away. But he was alive, and he was carrying information that would change everything. Admiral Ross flew out to meet him as soon as the news reached Earth. She found Jake in the medical bay refusing treatment until he could deliver his report. "Admiral," Jake said, his voice rough from months of screaming. "They're coming for all of us, every human being on Earth." He spread the stolen alien data across a table. Star charts, invasion plans, and detailed biological profiles of humanity. The scope of the threat was beyond anything Earth's leaders had imagined. "How many ships?" Admiral Ross asked. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. They have an entire fleet dedicated to harvesting intelligent species." Jake's hands shook as he pointed to different sections of the data. Earth is next on their list. Dr. Lisa Park arrived at the medical station 6 hours later. When she saw Jake, she started crying. The man who had been her commander and friend was still there, but he was changed in ways that went deeper than physical scars. "Jake, I'm so sorry. We tried to find you, but..." "I know," Jake said quietly. "But Lisa, we don't have time for apologies. Look at this data, really look at it." Lisa studied the alien files with the trained eye of a scientist. What she saw made her face go pale. "They're not just planning to invade," she said slowly. "They're planning to farm us like cattle." Jake nodded. "They see us as nothing more than interesting animals, but they made one mistake, Lisa. They let me see how they think, how they plan, how they fight, and now I'm going to teach humanity everything I learned." Admiral Ross looked at the data, then at Jake's scarred face, then back at the data. The choice was clear. "I'm calling an emergency session of the World Defense Council," she said. "Dr. Park, I want you to start analyzing this technology immediately. And Jake..." She paused, looking at the hardness in his eyes. "I want you to tell them exactly what we're dealing with." Jake stood up from the medical bed, ignoring the protests of the doctors. 8 months of hell had taught him many things, but the most important lesson was this. Sometimes survival required becoming something darker than what threatened you. "Admiral," he said, "by the time I'm done with my report, every human being will understand what these creatures really are, and then we're going to show them what happens when you treat humans like animals." The war was about to begin. The alien staging ground was exactly where Scale had said it would be. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of the Retribution, staring at the massive collection of ships floating in the darkness of deep space. "How many?" he asked his tactical officer. "Over 800 vessels, sir. Most of them are harvest ships, designed to carry prisoners, not fight battles." Jake Morrison studied the enemy formation through the bridge's main screen. After 8 months as their prisoner, he could identify different ship types by sight. The sleek vessels in the center were the research ships, filled with laboratories like the one where he had suffered. The larger box-like ships around them were transports for carrying captured specimens. "They're not expecting a fight," Jake said quietly. "Look at their formation. They're arranged for efficiency, not defense." Admiral Webb nodded. "All ships, this is Retribution. Begin attack pattern Morrison Alpha. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth today. We're fighting for every species these creatures have enslaved." The human expeditionary force moved forward like a swarm of angry insects. The smaller ships went first, using their speed to get close before the aliens could react. Behind them came the battleships, their heavy weapons charging for the killing blow. The aliens detected the human fleet when it was still an hour away. Through intercepted communications, Jake could hear the confusion in their voices. Kinon, vessels approaching from Vector 779, an alien commander reported. Configuration does not match any known species. Impossible, came the reply. The harvest of Sol 3 is not scheduled for 6 more cycles. No species from that system possesses interstellar capability. Jake smiled grimly. The aliens' arrogance was about to become their downfall. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature star. Human plasma weapons, designed specifically to penetrate alien shields, tore through the enemy formation. But the aliens weren't helpless. Their energy beams lashed out, destroying several human fighters in brilliant explosions. Their central command ship, Jake said, pointing to the largest vessel in the alien fleet. That's where the Examiner will be, the creature that tortured me. Admiral Webb looked at him. Can you identify it specifically? I'll know it when I see it, Jake said, his voice hard as steel. The battle raged for hours. Human ships darted between the larger alien vessels like wolves hunting buffalo. The aliens had superior technology, but they fought like scientists, not soldiers. Their tactics were predictable, just as Jake had promised, but humans fought like survivors. When their ships were damaged, they rammed them into alien vessels. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as bombs. Every human pilot knew that defeat meant the end of their species. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the enemy, the communications officer reported. Put it through, Admiral Webb ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was the Examiner's, the same metal-scraping tone that had haunted Jake's nightmares for months. Unknown species, you are interfering with a lawful harvest operation. Withdraw immediately or face consequences. Jake grabbed the microphone before Admiral Webb could respond. This is General Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Force. You remember me, don't you? Specimen 2847. There was a long pause. Then the Examiner's voice came back, and for the first time, Jake heard something new in it. Surprise. Impossible. Specimen 2847 was terminated during transport. I'm very much alive, Jake said. And I brought friends. The tide of battle turned when Dr. Lisa Park's new weapons came into play. The human ships had been holding back their most powerful systems, waiting for the right moment. Now plasma torpedoes and gravity bombs struck the alien formation with devastating effect. Jake watched as the research ships, those floating chambers of torture, exploded one by one. Each destruction felt like justice for the countless beings who had suffered in alien laboratories. General Morrison, Admiral Webb said, we've identified the Examiner's ship. It's trying to escape. Jake looked at the tactical display. A sleek research vessel was breaking away from the main formation, heading for the edge of the system where it could jump to hyperspace. Not today, Jake said. Admiral, request permission to lead a strike team to that ship. Granted, but Jake, bring that creature back alive if you can. We need to understand their technology. Jake strapped on his combat armor and gathered his team. Among them was Resonance, the crystal being he had freed from the alien laboratory. The creature's abilities would be useful in disabling alien technology. Their boarding ship was fast and stealthy. It caught up with the Examiner's vessel just as it reached the system's edge. Human plasma cutters burned through the alien hull, and Jake led his team inside. The corridors were exactly as he remembered, cold, sterile, and filled with the sounds of alien machinery. But this time, Jake wasn't a helpless prisoner. This time, he was the hunter. They fought their way through the ship's defenses. The aliens had weapons, but they weren't soldiers. They were scientists who had never faced an enemy that could fight back effectively. Jake found the Examiner in its laboratory, desperately trying to destroy research data. The creature looked exactly as he remembered, tall, multi-eyed, with claws that had once caused him so much pain. Specimen 2847, the Examiner said, turning to face him. You have developed in unexpected ways. Your species shows remarkable adaptability. My name is Jake Morrison, Jake said, raising his weapon. And you're going to answer for every person you've tortured. The examiner tilted its head. Fascinating. You demonstrate the revenge behavior we observed in your psychological profiles. This anger, it drives your entire species to violence. You're wrong, Jake said. It's not anger, it's justice. The alien reached for a weapon, but Jake was faster. The plasma beam struck the examiner in the chest, dropping it to the floor. But Jake didn't kill it. Admiral Webb wanted it alive for questioning. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the alien fleet. Of the 800 ships that had been preparing to harvest Earth, none escaped. The few aliens who survived were taken prisoner, a reversal that shocked them more than any weapon could have. But victory came at a cost. Nearly half the human fleet was destroyed, and thousands of brave men and women had died to protect their species. Earth's industrial capacity was devastated by the war effort, and it would take years to recover. Jake stood in the detention area of the Retribution, looking at the examiner through the cell's transparent wall. The alien was restrained and helpless, just as Jake had once been. You want to know about human nature, Jake said. We remember everything. Every kindness, every cruelty, every debt that needs to be paid. You studied us like animals, but you never understood what makes us human. The examiner looked at him with its multiple black eyes. What happens now, specimen? Now you get to experience what it's like to be studied by a species that sees you as less than equal, Jake replied. But unlike you, we won't torture you for entertainment. We'll learn what we need to defend ourselves, and then you'll face justice. The journey back to Earth took months. During that time, human scientists learned everything they could from captured alien technology. The rescued prisoners from dozens of species were given medical treatment and offered new homes on human worlds. When the fleet finally returned to Earth, they were greeted as heroes. But Jake felt no joy in the celebration. The war was over, but at a terrible cost. Humanity had survived, but they were changed forever. Admiral Ross met him at the spaceport. Jake, you've been offered a position heading up our new Alien Defense Division. We need someone who understands the threats that might be out there. Jake looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness other species might be facing the same horror he had endured. Humanity had proven they could defend themselves, but the galaxy was full of predators. I accept, he said. But first I want to send a message to every corner of known space. The message went out on every frequency humanity could broadcast. It was simple, direct, and unmistakably human. This is Earth. We are the species you called specimens. We remember pain. We learn from suffering. We never forget our debts. To any species facing harvest or enslavement, we will help you fight. To any species that treats intelligent beings as animals, we are coming for you. Jake Morrison had once been a peaceful explorer. The aliens had turned him into something harder, something more dangerous, and in doing so, they had awakened something in humanity that would change the galaxy forever. The age of humans being victims was over. The age of humans as protectors had begun.